A sequel to the smash hit adventure film Raiders of the Lost Ark was a no-brainer, like storing your ice cream in the freezer rather than a bain-marie. But as the middle part of a planned trilogy, the second chapter was probably going to go a bit darker.
We are going to die!
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. How do you top a film like Raiders of the Lost Ark? Maybe you can't, but you can follow it. Or maybe to follow it, you really need to precede it. Does that make sense? Of course not, but pay attention and it might lead to something.
Fortune and glory.
It's Shanghai 1936. A deal to swap a sacred artifact for a diamond goes tits up and Indiana Jones is poisoned by local gangster Lao She.
Antidote to what? The poison you just drank up.
After Indy uses imported singer Willie Scott as a shield, a slapstick scene ensues with Jones trying to recover an antidote while Willie is after the diamond.
I don't want to go!
A short chase later and Indy, along with Willie and Indy's best bud, Short Round, think they have escaped Lao She.
Nice try, Lao She!
And that's the best part of the film for me. So then the rest of it is grim, occasionally funny and fun, but also darker, danker, and dicker. So if you are squeamish and have a problem with creepy crawlies, bugs, and exotic cuisine, oh, if so, I just don't know how to break it to you about what's to come.
And wasn't it the Sultan of Madagascar who threatened to cut your head off if you ever returned to his country?
No, it wasn't my head.
Then your hands, perhaps.
It wasn't my hands. It was my...
Here's a hypothetical question. The pilots have bailed out, taking the only parachutes with them, no one can fly, and there's no fuel left. Do you A, jump out of the plane and flap your wings, thinking if it works for hummingbirds, it should for humans? I mean, they're more or less next to each other in the encyclopedia. B, jump out of the plane in an inflatable raft? No, that's silly. Why would you do that? You die. C, wait for Luke Skywalker. Wait, wrong movie. There are no wrong answers. Every single one of them will result in at least one person in the audience yelling bullshit. After choosing B and landing in a fast-moving river, Indy and Short Round are dismayed to find Willie jumped out of the plane with them.
I hate you!
Good!
Indy and company happen on a village in India where the kids have been children napped and a sacred stone has been pinched by evildoers. Indy heads for Pancott Palace, with Willie whining for pretty much the entire trip.
Quit complaining, this is expensive stuff.
Willie is not an adventurous woman, and hanging out with elephants and snakes and vampire bats is not her idea of a pleasant stroll in a manicured garden.
Cut it out. I said, cut it out!
Short Round and Indy bicker just as much.
Hey, you cheat, Dr. Jones.
But they seem happy enough since they have a purpose, which is apparently to cheat at cards. They reach Pancott Palace and are greeted by the Prime Minister and the Maharaja and treated to a magnificent feast of insect guts, eyeballs, snakes stuffed with more snakes, and chilled monkey brains. Don't laugh, there's a hip new place in Brooklyn that has the exact same menu, but you wouldn't have heard of it.
You're not eating?
Indy tries to get a reaction by asking about the ancient Thuggee cult that was historically active in the area.
Tell me later what happened.
After sniping at each other for most of the film thus far, Indy and Willie have decided on a truce in order to facilitate a booty call. But things go awry when a Thuggee killer gets in the way with his own form of autoerotic foreplay. Indy, possibly a little short-sighted without his glasses, finds a way into the palace's secret passage, which is of course filled with everything and anything that might trigger your entomophobia.
Oh, I broke a nail.
Oh, for a roach bomb right now. One of the too few cool sequences of the film, Indy and Short Round are trapped in a room that is a marvel of ancient engineering, but also completely impractical since a room whose main purpose is to crush to death its occupants must surely result in several building code violations. It's like an escape room, but one with a marginally higher chance of being impaled on a steel spike. The party reach the caverns where the Thuggee cult leader Mola Ram has an army of slaves searching for the last two Shankara stones to join the three he already has in his possession, including the one from the village earlier. Now what about this poor guy? He gets his heart ripped out and before he can even sign up for a gym membership is thrust into a pool of lava.
You could get killed chasing after your damn fortune and glory.
Indy is drugged and becomes one of Mola Ram's slaves. Short Round is put to work in the mines, which are staffed by miners. That is, they are miners who are also miners. These miners clearly have a lousy union since this guy was also their shop steward. Willie, who thus far has endeared herself to almost no one, is about to be lowered into the lava, partly because she would make an excellent sacrifice, but also it's the only way anyone can think of to get her to quit whining. There's a lengthy fight scene, and then a lengthy minecart scene, and then some more fight scenes, and then a climax on a rope bridge, where Indy and Mola Ram trade blows. So, do you like Temple of Doom? Steven Spielberg wasn't keen on the dark subject matter, and George Lucas, whose idea all of this was, later admitted to it not being his favourite. Thanks, George Lucas.
Oh my God, is he nuts?
You know nuts. He's crazy.
When Steven Spielberg first agreed to direct Raiders of the Lost Ark, his friend, writer and producer George Lucas told him he'd have to agree to direct 3 Indiana Jones films in all. After Raiders did rather well critically and commercially, they turned their attention to a new Indiana Jones adventure. Of course, Lucas had to first close out his Star Wars trilogy, and Spielberg had released E.T., which for the second time made Spielberg the director of the biggest film of all time. As the middle chapter of an Indiana Jones trilogy, it was understood the next film would be darker, but no one was really prepared for how dark the film would be. Lucas was going through a divorce at the time, so the normally upbeat filmmaker was not in the best of moods. Rather than buy a new Lamborghini, he instead traumatized a generation of young filmgoers with Temple of Doom. The new film would be a prequel, set in 1936, so a few years before the events of Raiders. Why? Well, they didn't really want to repeat themselves and have Nazi villains again, and they wanted a different female lead for each film. At the same time, they didn't want to venture into awkward territory and have to deal with what happened to Marion Ravenwood. Of course, having introduced Short Round and Willie Scott, they retrospectively made every other film more awkward since neither is mentioned again. If you think Temple of Doom is dark, it appears that Indy, Willie and Short Round's trip to Delhi after the events of the film may not have been as uneventful as they would have liked.
What's the surprise?
Some of Temple of Doom's set pieces had originally been envisaged for Raiders of the Lost Ark. When planning for Temple of Doom, Spielberg dusted off the storyboards for the rapid sequence and the Minecart Chase, though no one's ever explained why Spielberg stored his important storyboards in such a dusty place to begin with. I mean, put them in a bag or something, man. Temple of Doom, with its masses of creepy crawlies, monkey brains, people's hearts ripped out, slave miners near death, Short Round being whipped, and most terrible of all, Willie Scott, may have pushed people's limits on what they considered fun. Expecting all of these ingredients to be crowd-pleasing to viewers lining up to see an Indiana Jones sequel was like trying to win a log-rolling contest in a desert. I mean, by all means try it, but there's a limit to how far you'll get.
This is Indiana Jones, the famous archaeologist.
Harrison Ford looks the part of a younger Indy, having trained hard for this film since he had to have his shirt off for part of it. Actors are notoriously superstitious, unable to say the name of the play Macbeth. Oh shit, that was close. And they will do odd things for luck, like have a lucky hat, or carry around a charm that gives them good luck, or perform a ritual they believe will help their performance. Harrison Ford's ritual was to horribly injure himself, which he did on many of his most successful films. During the filming of Temple of Doom, Ford's back was giving him grief, and after one fight scene, things had gotten to the point where the actor simply couldn't continue without more intensive treatment. Indy, where's Indy? Indy emergency room. Ford was sent back to the US for an operation and his subsequent recovery, which took roughly 6 weeks. The production continued filming whatever they could, using doubles for Ford where they needed to. In many interiors where you can't see Ford's face, it's probably his stunt double Vic Armstrong, whose job was to not break anything. If you want to wish an actor luck, you tell them to break a leg. If you say that to a stuntman, they'll probably punch you in the stomach. Fortunately, Ford's back treatment was successful and he was eventually able to return to film close-up shots. Throughout the production, Harrison Ford sustained other smaller injuries, cuts here and there, some for luck and some just for old time's sake.
I'm not that easy.
I'm not that easy either.
Indiana Jones in this film feels a lot more mercenary than the slightly older version we'd met previously. He comes off as being greedy, recovering an artifact in return for a giant diamond for payment. This version of Indy is best summed up by these words.
Fortune and glory, kid.
He's not after the Shankara stones for the fortune part, but the glory part can make him just as greedy. Or maybe he's just a bit of a dick in this film.
But you'll never have better.
don't know. As a scientist, I don't want to prejudice my experiment. I'll let you know in the morning.
The film's intro showcases Willie at her best, a Busby Berkeley-style musical number featuring Scott singing Cole Porter's Anything Goes in Mandarin.
Anything goes.
Kate Capshaw as Willie Scott is almost the complete opposite of Marion from Raiders. Willie is not a plucky tomboy adventurer, but a manicured singer who's as comfortable in the jungle as a grizzly bear is performing La Boheme in Tuscany. Willie complains, whines, shrieks, screams, and moans her way into, well, Indy's heart at least.
You'll be back over here in 5 minutes.
I'll be asleep in 5 minutes.
5. You know it, and I know it.
She's possibly the least favourite of Indy's girlfriends. Yes, less popular than the Nazi. Of course, Capshaw did at least have one fan, years later marrying Steven Spielberg after he just ran out of excuses not to cast her in his movies.
The biggest trouble with her is the noise.
Huy Quan attended the casting call to support his brother's audition,
Dr. Jump! No more parachutes!
but impressed the casting director and everyone else on the project. Short Round was a street urchin who became Indy's best friend, someone to snipe and argue with Indy while Willie was taking a break.
Bad news. You listen to Sowamu, you live longer.
The main villain is Mola Ram, though you could call him a mofo ram. He's one of only a few major characters in the film.
Drop them, Dr. Jones! They will be found!
As the thuggy leader, he's both impressive and scary, like a bill from a restaurant in London. And of course, there's Pat Roach.
You know how to fly, don't you?
No, do you?
In terms of MPAA ratings in the US, Temple of Doom was in a grey area. It was just a bit much to get a PG rating, nor was it really deserving of an R rating, but there was nothing in between. Spielberg suggested to the MPAA, who set the movie ratings, that there really needed to be something in between. Parental guidance plus, with an older threshold, and thus the PG-13 rating was born. How well that worked with home video releases anyway is debatable. I know I saw my fair share of R or equivalent movies at a young age and I turned out okay, apart from the depression, violent tendencies, irritable bowel syndrome, a morbid fascination with ninja burial rituals, excessive perspiration in new social settings, obsessive compulsive need to maintain an online database ranking the latest K-pop releases, and night terrors. So sure, show an 8-year-old The Brood and wonder why the sheets need to get changed daily. Temple of Doom has another great John Williams score, which is almost a given during this period. Indy's sound design is still top-notch, with every punch feeling like a whale slapping down a fisherman. Of course, the crisp cinematography, production and costume design gives the film an aesthetic that low-budget competitors could never compete with. Setting so much of the film in a compressed area does lessen some of the epicness of most indie films. It feels like most of the film is set in the caverns, which makes it feel more claustrophobic than epic. But it's probably only about 40%. It feels awful, but looks and sounds amazing. Alright, Temple of Doom is better than 95% of action-adventure movies, but that doesn't mean I love it. I like it well enough. It's a very well-made film in general. But out of the 4 Indiana Jones films, even the one that people really hate, I'm going to rate this one as the least enjoyable to watch, the one I will put off watching when it's next in line. Apart from the scenes in Shanghai, Temple of Doom is missing a vital element: joy. It feels like a film conceived on a bad day, where perhaps a trip to the beach or a zoo or a vineyard giving away factory seconds may have been more productive.
Fortune and glory?
Fortune and glory.
Ooh, well that escalated, with bugs and scares and gross out moments and Willie Scott, Indy being a bit of a dick. It would be 5 years before the third of the original trilogy showed up. We'd get the gang, most of them, back together again and meet Indy's dad to go on some sort of, last crusade. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below or check out some of our other videos.
Madam, it was the best I could do at such short notice. Heavens, aren't you Willie Scott, the famous American female vocalist?